Today is day 12 of the Karen Read trial. I'm going to give you my daily recap. I'm guessing that this is going to be two parts because the witness that was on the stand was not very compliant during the cross-examination, and because of the sheer amount of evidence that they entered on direct exam, it's just a lot to get through. The next witness for the prosecution is Sergeant from the Mass State Police, Yuri Buchanan, and he has been a homicide detective for almost 10 years. He was in the military for a while, has a lot of military training, and then did some other law enforcement roles, and then ultimately ended up with the Mass State Police. So essentially he's brought into everything because he is working with Trooper Michael Proctor. And I know sometimes I'm going to mess up and call him Trooper Proctor, but a lot of the time they refer to him as Mr. Proctor because he is the disgraced Mass State Trooper who I'm trying not to spoil everything. Last investigation had a bunch of text messages that were leaked, and he has since been fired from the Mass State Police. Buchanan said he never investigates a scene alone. It's always a team effort. He received the call at 6:44 a.m. on January 29th, and he relayed the info to Michael Proctor. Originally, it was Michael Proctor always on the call for that morning. For some reason, he got the actual phone call, but he relayed the info. And then he started digging out his car and everything, and they met together at the Canton Police Station in order to exchange information and then ride together because they were going to be spending a lot of time together for the investigation that day. He said he arrived at Canton PD around 9:15. He met with Sergeant Good also to get briefed, and he was shown the broken cocktail glass, and they were provided John O'Keefe's cell phone and the brown paper bag with the 6 plastic Solo cups full of the blood and snow combination that was definitely melted by then. He was made aware of the family relationship that was going on with Canton PD, and so that they were being recused from investigation. He says for interview portion of the investigation, he learned the witness was making statements that she had hit him, and they had 3 witnesses they interviewed. Then they headed to Good Samaritan Hospital. They interviewed Jen McCabe, Matt McCabe, and Brian Albert, all at the McCabe residence, and they arrived to the hospital around 12:30 or 1. By that time, Mr. O'Keefe was already pronounced dead. They observed him and saw the pile of clothing on the floor inside the hospital room. We get into some of the injuries that John O'Keefe had. He explained that he had injuries to his arm. He described them as abrasions. His face, he has a bruise on the back of his hand here too, which wasn't really mentioned a lot during the first trial. And then he had a bruise on his arm. He had blood pooling on the back of his head, swelling of both of his eyes, and a laceration was on the face. His clothing was found in that hospital room, like I said, and it was bagged. It was going to be marked as evidence, but it was wet at the time. One shoe was missing. So they were calling around to the paramedics to see if it was in the ambulance. It was not. And they were assuming that it would be at the scene. And they were guessing that he was possibly hit by a car because there's something like a saying that you're knocked out of your shoes. And so that's kind of where the investigation was leading them. He learned that Karen Read was at her parents' house in Dighton, and they decided to go to her, and they arrived around 3 p.m. They arrived to Dighton, like I said, at 3 p.m., and they saw the SUV. He was about 10 feet away, he said, from it. He said that Trooper Proctor was a little bit closer, maybe 3 to 4 feet, but neither of them ever touched the vehicle, and they had it seized. Eventually, it was put on a flatbed truck and towed. They start interviewing Karen Read at this point too. She's inside the home of her parents. They're also there and present. She says that John went out with a friend that night, and she met them at C.F. McCarthy's later. They went to the waterfall and met others, and then they went back to the 34 Fairview residence where she dropped him off, but she did not see him go inside the house. She was asked if she left the bar with a drink. She didn't think so. She was asked if she saw John go in the house. I just said that. She said no. She was asked about her taillight, and she said she didn't know how, but she did it last night. She also said that she made a 3-point turn and left. She was asking about how John sustained these injuries, and she didn't know. And they didn't have a warrant to seize the car or the phone, but they are able to seize it so that somebody doesn't like manipulate it or do anything like that. But eventually they do get the search warrants. The vehicle was brought to the Canton Police Sallyport. Even though they were recused, Brennan wants to clarify, they had a large heated Sallyport and there was a lot of snow all over the vehicle, so it was important that the snow melted. And then he's talking about what he did once the vehicle arrived to that Sallyport. He hung caution tape around it. He says he never saw Proctor touch it. And he stayed at the Sallyport until about 5:51 p.m. And they used Canton PD as kind of like a home base for their investigation to relay info in the conference rooms. And they met with some of the CERT team there too. The CERT team had concluded their efforts, and then the plan was to take shovels and rakes and go back to 34 Fairview in the coming days to look for additional evidence. I forgot to mention earlier, but they were going to look for that baseball hat that John O'Keefe was wearing. And then we get back to the clothing that was at the hospital room. It was bagged, and he brought it with him in the floorboard of his vehicle. Buchanan was driving, he says, and then they brought it to the district attorney's office around 8 p.m. and they have a temporary evidence area that they stored it in, and he put out butcher paper and laid the clothing there to dry because he was worried that mold was going to grow on it because it was wet in the bags. And Proctor was helping with this. We have Yuri opening the bag with John O'Keefe's pants, and then he holds it up for the jury. I am very confused about the grass stains. But this might be something that happens when somebody gets hit by a car. I don't ever really provide my own commentary in these, but it could also mean that potentially somebody was dragged through a lawn, I would be guessing. I really do hope that the jury gets to see the photographs of the jeans laid out that they took, because you can see where the blood pattern was on his pants. Then we get into the shoe that was recovered, and this was like a major awkward moment, like what moment for today of testimony, because he is pulling out the shoe and he holds up the sneaker, and Brennan says, "Is this the sneaker from the hospital?" And he says, "No, sir, this is the sneaker from 34 Fairview." After double checking the packaging like he's doing right here, this is the right sneaker. And we saw the sneaker from 34 Fairview, I think yesterday with Connor Keefe, or the other day. My days are all mixed up. So how are there two shoes from 34 Fairview? So Alan Jackson objects. He asked to, the judge asked to see counsel and the witness, and then Brennan asks for a representative from the defense to come back to speak with the judge about this issue. So we're all like, okay, like what happened? What's the confusion? And they come back like nothing happened. There's no clarification at all. So we're all just still confused, and they move right along. He returns to 34 Fairview on February 3rd around 9:30 a.m. to write search warrants and look for the missing hat. The area that they were focused on was the flagpole and the lawn mostly. They were looking for any type of evidence that they could find. And that's when they find the drinking straw, which is just a plain black straw. They find a lot of pieces of taillight over the coming days, but the main thing was that they directed all of their officers, on your way to work and on your way home, if you're driving by 34 Fairview, get out, stop, take a look, check for some pieces of evidence, and if you find something, call us and let us know. On February 4th, they found a really large piece, not really large, but I guess they do say a larger piece here. And he also returned on February 10th. And over the course of these few days, we learned that they find 40 more pieces of taillight. Buchanan also helped get the surveillance video from C.F. McCarthy's and the waterfall, working in conjunction with Michael Proctor. And then we get some direct questions. Does Michael Proctor still work with you? He says no. And were you his boss? Yes. Were you on a text chain with Michael Proctor? Yes. He's claiming he didn't read the whole chain because he was on a police detail, but he glanced at it and then acknowledged the message with a thumbs up. And we've all seen the text before, but I'm going to make you guys go to part 2 for the rest.